All right, so we're going to walk through these cum clauses and indirect questions that you find all through these practice sentences that I've given to you and have asked you to translate. So it says translate the following sentences, identify the subjunctive verbs and the type of clause they are in. At this point, we've only learned four clauses, three kinds of cum clauses, and then the indirect question, which remember is the question that is being reported instead of asked directly. So let's look at number one. Cum mulerius Brundisio jam profectus esset, tamen nescivit ubi Romam adveniret, et an Corneliam statum videret. First, we see the cum. We notice that Valerius is not in the ablative, so this is a cum clause. You then can come over here and look at the verb. Profectus esset is a subjunctive. I can tell because what I've highlighted there is a perfect infinitive. So all you have to do is to add on an ending, and thus onto a perfect infinitive. An ending makes a pluperfect subjunctive. So we then look for the tamen in the main clause, knowing that we, of course, have a cum clause subjunctive, and there it is, meaning we know that this is a cum, translated although, and of course it is showing a concession, cum concessive or adversative clause. So although Valerius already had set out pluperfect translated the exact same way if it were an indicative. Here is the ablative of a city, town, or small island, so it's away from Brundisium. Nevertheless, he did not know when he, and then adveniret is a subjunctive as well. It is an imperfect subjunctive. You can tell because it has the present infinitive plus the ending, so imperfect subjunctive. And so he did not know when he was arriving, but since it's subjunctive, we can make it subjunctive-y sounding in English by using a helping verb would. He did not know when he would arrive to Rome, a city, town, small island in the accusative case means towards, and he did not know whether he was seeing or would see Cornelius immediately. So this is the pluperfect subjunctive in the cum adversative clause. This is your main verb. This is an imperfect subjunctive that is in the indirect question. The direct question would be, when was he arriving to Rome? But here it's being reported to us saying that he didn't know when he would arrive. And this also on down to the videret, with the videret being in the subjunctive, is an indirect question whether he would see Cornelia immediately. Number two, another cum. That is not an ablative, so it's cum clause. I look at my verb and it's loquator. It's obviously present tense because it has a present stem from loquor, loqui, locutus sum, a present vowel, and then a present ending. But we don't know whether it is a subjunctive or an indicative. It, of course, lies in the vowel in and of itself. Remember, looking back at the study guide that I had previously with the subjunctives, here you can see that the A of a first conjugation is subjunctive, or indicative, whereas the A of a third conjugation is subjunctive. So our verb in question is loquor, loqui, a third conjugation. It's a deponent verb, and so it is subjunctive. And so we look for the tamen, indicating in the main clause that it would be a adversative cum clause, and it's not there. So we translate this cum as when, then we go back and translate it as since and see which one makes more sense. So when the teacher talks, is talking, does talk, all the students listen, or since the teacher talks, all the students listen. I would argue that it's better translated as when. If you made an argument that since makes more, then obviously that would mean that the teacher talking is the cause. It is the cum causal. But I think it's the circumstance, in that when or whenever the teacher talks, all the students listen. And so that's a present subjunctive in a cum circumstantial clause. Cum sextus, let's go ahead and fix that, making it capitalized right now. Non audieret, nescivit unde Aeneas venisset, ubi Hesperia esset, et cur Aeneas Troia effugisset. So here we again have a cum clause that is not an ablative. We look at the verb, and it is an imperfect subjunctive, easily identifiable because the infinitive plus the ending T makes the imperfect subjunctive, and we don't have a tamen in the other clauses. So when Sextus was not listening, or since Sextus was not listening, he did not know. I would argue it's pretty clear here that this would make better sense as the fact that him not listening is the cause of him not knowing. So this is then the cum causal clause. He did not know from where unde Aeneas had come. I translated had come because it is a perfect infinitive plus your ending, making a pluperfect subjunctive. From where Aeneas had come, where Hesperia was. This is nothing more than the verb sum esse, the infinitive, plus an ending, making it an imperfect subjunctive, and why Aeneas had fled from Troy, city in the ablative away from. These verbs, venisset and esset and effugisset, are all three verbs that are governing indirect questions. The direct question would be, from where had he come? Or where was Hesperia? Or why had Aeneas fled? But of course, here, as they are indirect questions being reported, in English, we switch the word order. Instead of saying from where had Aeneas come, we say he didn't know from where Aeneas had come. So you're switching the words very slightly, but those are the indirect questions. Number 3. Cum, not an ablative. Look at our verb, conspexit. Now this conspexit is an indicative, which makes it rather easy. It tells us, 1, the cum is translated when, and then secondly, that it is a specific time. This is the cum temporal, indicating that all that's highlighted is giving us the specific time that the main action or the action that it is subordinate to, of course, takes place. So when the teacher spotted at a specific time, I know because it's indicative, specificity, he spotted Sextus, the talking one, loquentem, present active participle. Immediately, he asked him, plurima difficilima, very many. It is superlative from the word multa, then plura, and then plurima, which is the most many or very many, and not just difficult, but very difficult questions implied, or things, as it were. Compare it to sentence number 4, which, again, has roughly identical of a clause, except compare conspexit with the perfect stem and the perfect indicative ending. Compare that to the perfect stem and the perfect subjunctive. Remember that the perfect subjunctive is erim, eris, erit, erimis, eritis, erint. Looking at it really quickly if we can find it. Almost there it is. And over here, the perfect, remember, it has erim, eris, erit. Its forms look very similar to future perfect indicative, but erim versus ero, but all the rest of them will, of course, be the same. So going back, then look for the tamen. Since we do have a subjunctive, I don't see it. So when or since the teacher spotted Sextus talking, immediately he castigated him. I would argue that you could go either one. It could be the circumstance generally. So whenever he spotted Sextus talking, immediately he scolded him, or since he spotted him. Here's an instance where I think you could say that it is either showing the circumstances or the cause. So very often you actually have a choice that's up to you. Number 5. Cum, not an ablative here, and so we go to look at our verb. It is a subjunctive, a pluperfect subjunctive from bibo, bibere, bibi, bisus, or bibi, as there's no fourth principal part, and it is a pluperfect subjunctive because we can see that it has the perfect infinitive, bibisse, plus the ending, making it a pluperfect subjunctive. I look for my tamen, I do not see it, so when or since is going to be the translation of cum. We have to decide which one. Titus had drunk. Nimis, too much, weenie of the wine. Cornelius, factus est, was made, has been made, became very angry. So I would argue that it's better as since. I think that this is the actual cause, since Titus had drunk too much of the wine. Cornelius was made very angry, has been made very angry. So this is the cause of his becoming angry. Neque, and not. Did he know? We arrange that in better English. And he did not know why Sextus, or Titus, I should say, did drink. It is a perfect, again, subjunctive there because it's an indirect question. The direct question was, why did he drink? Here it is, of course, he did not know why he did drink. Tantum, so much, so great, tantus, tantum, of the wine. And he did not know, another indirect question with an, of course, subjunctive, a perfect infinitive, plus the ending, making a pluperfect subjunctive. He did not know from where he had come. Number 6, cum sextus, not an ablative, must be a cum clause. Go look at my verb. It is loquatur. Again, loquor, loqui. That is a third conjugation. Thus, here the a, we fear a giant liar. That is a subjunctive. So I go look for the tamen, and it's there. So this is easy. Although. So it is showing, of course, a concession. Although Sextus says or talks. And then what we have here is say, which is accusative. Accusative, sui sibi, say, is our subject of an indirect statement. Indirect statement, remember, is going to be a clause that is dependent, a subordinate clause, with an accusative subject and an infinitive verb. And this infinitive is a deponent, looks passive, translates actively, so conor, conari. So although Sextus says, talks, says is better here, I think, that, there's no word that, but that's the word in English we use to introduce the indirect statement, that he himself always tries to learn, discere, nevertheless, he is beaten. This, of course, verberare, a non-subjunctive indicative, because it is first conjugation, whereas this a was in a third conjugation telling us was subjunctive indicative with the a and subjunctive with the a, because third conjugation versus first. And thus he is beaten very cruelly, a superlative adverb, by the teacher. Period. Then Sextus does not know in the present tense. On, remember, introduces an indirect question and means whether he is beaten or whether he might be beaten. Again, in the English, we use words like might, may, can, could, would, should to indicate non-specificity. And so you could choose one here. He does not know whether he may be beaten by Cornelius. Here you saw the A vowel of the indicative. Here we see that turns to the E vowel of the subjunctive. And it actually probably should be a long E. So let's go ahead and fix that now, making it a long E. There it is. And so therefore he does not know whether he may be beaten by Cornelius, but he knows that. And again, it's an indirect statement. Here you see with the infinitive, verb, and your impersonal it. He does know that it is necessary to say true things. We would say to tell the truth. And so here, of course, we have our subjunctives, the loquatur, because it is in a cum adversative clause. The, of course, verberator, because it is an indirect question. Number 7, cum, that's not an ablative, so we have a cum clause. I look and see what kind of verb. My verb is indeed a subjunctive. I look for a tamen. I do not see it. And so when or since, it's either the when circumstances or the since cause. So when or since Sextus was writing a letter to his father, the letter was full of lies. So is it since or because he was writing a letter, the letter was full of lies, or the circumstance when he wrote a letter to his father? I would argue that it's pretty clear circumstances here, in that it's just the general non-specific circumstance that whenever he wrote a letter to his dad, the letter was full mandaciarum of lies. The father of Sextus, Sextus's dad, never knew, never did know. And again, indirect question, whether he, now make it subjunctive here. It's an imperfect subjunctive. You see the infinitive plus the ending, whether he should believe, whether he would believe, whether he could believe. And remember that crederet is a verb that requires a dative object, because you are not just believing, but giving belief to. So whether he should believe his son, and he did not know. Another indirect question, fieret, is an odd form of passive of the verb facio. And so here again, infinitive plus an ending makes imperfect subjunctive. Why always he was, or why he would become, or why he may be a mendax, one who tells that mendacia, which of course would be a liar. So again, another subjunctive imperfect because of indirect question, and another subjunctive imperfect crederet because of indirect question. But over here, scriberet, because it was a cum circumstance clause giving the general circumstances of the letter being full of lies. What were the general circumstances? Well, when he wrote it. Number 8, cum, and look, Euclideae is in the ablative case. So this is probably a non-cum clause, but instead it is merely a prepositional phrase. So, on the daily quotidie, the boys went to the school, cum Euclideae, with Euclides. And cum, here now, it is not ablative, so this is a cum clause. And when conspeix erit, this is a subjunctive, perfect, again, perfect stem. Instead of isti it indicative, it is erim, eris, erit, subjunctive. And when he spotted a bakery, pistrinam, he asked Euclides whether on it is permitted, whether it might be permitted, may be permitted. EA is clear from 1,000 miles away that that has to be a subjunctive form, and it is because it is going to be an indirect question. He asked Euclides whether it would be permitted, whether it might be permitted, whether it may be permitted, whether it is permitted to buy something of the food for them. Can be, of course, is your genitive part of a whole. And so here what we have is, one, the conspeix erit, meaning that obviously this cum is the cum circumstances. So it's when, as in whenever he spotted a bakery, kind of like when many of us all the time we're riding with our mom or dad in the car, and when we spot the fast food restaurant we like, we always ask. It's the general circumstances, not a specific instance. And here it is, he asked Euclides. Nevertheless, I think here there might have been a mistake made. There's no reason for that to be subjunctive, so let's make it indicative. That is the main clause that could stand on its own. He asked Euclides, so roga wit, indicative, instead of course, the subjunctive. Number 9, almost done. Cum, sextus, not an ablative. I go and look at my verb, missus est. That is indicative. It would be missus sit if it were, of course, a subjunctive. Remember the difference when we look at the forms in the perfect tense passive. It is, of course, using in the indicative sum est est, sumus estis sunt, versus the subjunctive sim sis sit, simus sitis sint. And so therefore we have an indicative. Since we have an indicative on our hands, then that means that this is giving us a specific time. It's a cum when temporal clause. When sextus was sent, has been sent, perfect passive, home by the teacher, the remaining boys, the rest of the boys fell silent. Here you know that this is not an infinitive because you're dealing with a perfect stem. You can tell because of that U that you see right there. And so at that specific time when Sextus was sent home, specific indicative, the rest of the boys, they fell silent. Domi, that is locative case. Remember that cities, towns, small islands, as well as domus takes an locative form, and thus we translate it at home. Cornelius asked Sextus why he had been sent home. Here, missus esset is the perfect infinitive, passive, plus the ending, making it a subjunctive pluperfect, and it's in an indirect question. The direct question would be, why had he been sent home? But in English, when it's indirect question, you switch the words, why he had, not why had he, but why he had been sent home. He, of course, asked another indirect question, where Marcus was. Again, here, nothing more than an imperfect subjunctive with a present infinitive plus an ending, and whether, another indirect statement, he had obeyed. Remember that paruiset here is, of course, the perfect infinitive plus the ending, pluperfect. He had obeyed the teacher. This verb paria parere requires an object in the dative case, the teacher in the school. Finally, number 10, cum miseri liberi. And thus, these are not in the ablative. Let's go look at our verb. It is oppressi sent. Therefore, it is subjunctive, and it's perfect subjunctive because it is the perfect passive participle paired with the present of the verb to be. It just happens to be the, of course, subjunctive of the verb to be. You remember here for the subjunctive forms of irregular verbs, the only ones you have to memorize are the present because imperfect, perfect, and pluperfect still follow the pattern sim, sis, sit, simus, situs, sint. These are paired with the verb, or I should say with the participle. You're dealing with a perfect subjunctive. So going back to finish it off, it says, I'm looking for the tamen, and I don't see it, so it's not although, it's when or since. When or since the miserable children were overwhelmed in the apartment building by flames and by fire. Igni is an I stem. That's why that long I is indicating ablative. Cornelia was made, became, from this irregular verb, fio, fieri, factus sum. It is the passive of the verb facio, to make or to do, so it is to be made or to be done. Cornelia was made very sad, and she asked her mom. So I would argue that this is showing the cause. What is the cause of her becoming very sad? It's the fact since the miserable children were overcome. It's not the general circumstances, but the cause of her. She was made very sad, a superlative, and she asked her mom, Matri Quomodo, in what way, introducing an indirect question. They were able to bring help to them. Here, of course, possum posse, present infinitive, plus the ending in T, making an imperfect subjunctive. And she asked her mama, quanta aqua, how much water, necesse est, was necessary to extinguish the fire. Here you can see we've then also still made an imperfect subjunctive. Take the infinitive, esse, particularly, and then you add the T. It's imperfect subjunctive because this is asking, or not asking, but telling us the indirect question. The direct question would be, how much water was necessary? Whereas here it is, she asked her mom how much water was necessary. All right, so hopefully you got a better understanding as to what's going on with cum clauses, and certainly I wish you the best of luck.